now, I'm not going to take any questions now because I want to introduce you to a man. This is going to be a real treat. He's led a life of adventure as a journalist and a writer and a husband and a father and a, what are you two steps?
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out. Yeah.
Future son-in-law.
A future son-in-law.
Oh.
And Al served our country by instructing 10th Group Special Forces and NATO officers in Germany, worked as a military contractor in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Afghanistan, and much more. Al is going to discuss his life, his work, and his terrific new novel, On Edge, which is right here. And this book got a review by Peter Lovesey. Peter Lovesey was here.
Yeah.
He was here giving a talk once, come to think of it. Diamond Dagger award-winning author, fantastic guy, wonderful speaker. And he wrote about Al. No question, On Edge is the real deal from a writer who knows the territory, has faced the fear, and seen the action. This isn't just a gripping story. It's the inside story, thrilling and compelling. Having just finished the book, I feel I've been there and I want more. Ta-da!
Thank you, Kelly.
Very welcome.
And the book, On Edge, is about Afghanistan. Takes place almost completely in Afghanistan, where I served two tours as a military contractor, which means that you work with the Army, and basically what you're doing is everything that people want you to do. So this is a map of Afghanistan just to familiarize ourselves with the country where we have been fighting a major war for 15 years. Right after 9/11, our first soldiers went in there. There were training areas that were being used by Al-Qaeda. We sent in 15 A-teams. A-teams have about 12 personnel in them, and they made contact with the Northern Alliance, which was up here, trying to fight against the Taliban, which had taken over Afghanistan. So we made contact with them, and then we came down. We were able to take over Bagram Air Base, which is a very big air base, had been used by the Russians, and also we were able to destroy all the training areas they were using to train Al-Qaeda terrorists, and also finally to chase bin Laden through Tora Bora into Pakistan. And that was all accomplished within about 2 or 3 months after 9/11. So the beginning of 2002, we were basically finished with Afghanistan, but that's not what happened. Our country sent in more soldiers there and tried to get rid of the Taliban in this way, but the Taliban have proved to be a much more persistent kind of enemy, I think, than our government has anticipated. So for a long time, we had close to 100,000 soldiers, military people, in Afghanistan. There were also NATO support there. There are an English base is down here. We have French soldiers over there, and also from other countries. We had over 90,000 military contractors, people like me, civilians. So we had a very big force in Afghanistan trying to get rid of the Taliban, never completely succeeding. So today we have about 7,000 or 8,000 troops there. I don't know how many military contractors. I would guess significantly more than that. Most of the military contractors are involved in training Afghan police and Afghan soldiers. So that is the situation today. Kabul, however, the capital of Afghanistan, has been transformed into a rather lively kind of city. When you're in Kabul, you encounter people from all the European countries. You encounter American people, and of course you encounter many Afghans. And in this way, it is a kind of an interesting place. It reminds me, I think I would say, of Berlin after the Second World War, when there were 4 powers there. But we have these 3 different groups trying to take control of Afghanistan and more or less intriguing against one another in Kabul. There's legitimately elected Afghan government. There is the NATO forces, primarily the United States, and there's also the Taliban. So everybody's doing something. When you're there, you can lead a fairly normal life. You'll probably be working. You could be working for one of the missions or one of the many charities or schools or even businesses that are there are trying to get started in Afghanistan. You'd work at maybe 9 to 5 or whatever. You'd probably be living in a guest house. On the weekends, you can enjoy going out to a restaurant. You can socialize with the various people that you encounter. You can go for walks around the city, but at the same time, it's dangerous. You never know when the Taliban might attack. How do they attack? Sometimes they'll just come in and start shooting up a restaurant. They'll plant IEDs, individual explosive devices, big bombs that go off at various places throughout the city. If a person's in the wrong place at the wrong time, obviously that can be bad. But you can, as I say, lead a fairly normal life. You go to work, you go home to your guest house, and you meet your friends, and so on and so forth. You get to know some of the Afghan people who are in themselves. They're very different, but kind of interesting, often quite friendly. So that is what's going on now in Kabul. And it's nevertheless quite different from the rest of Afghanistan. If you're out here somewhere, you really don't know what the situation is. The Taliban can be all over, and being an American is not always the best situation. I was once in a store in Kabul. I went in with a bunch of German trainers. They were training troops, actually they were training police. And we were doing some shopping on Chicken Street. That's the main shopping area there. And the shopkeeper, as many Afghans are, was quite curious about who everybody was. And they said, "Oh, we're German." He said, "Oh, German, great." He said, "Americans." So I didn't say who I was. I was just standing there quietly. So anyway, that is the situation. You don't want to wander around in Kabul at night. There are no street lights. It's dark. What there are market flyers here and there where people can go and shop, things like this. But the streets are kind of
Do you want me to order them for you?
can be dangerous if somebody knew you were an American. So you want to avoid certain. Beyond that, as I say, you could spend, and many people do these days, spend a year or 2 years working in Kabul. But I would not advise people to, as I say, travel around unless you're traveling with the military. Just driving a car around Afghanistan, which you can do, but you never know exactly what's going to happen. So it's always a bit of a crapshoot. Now, something else that's quite interesting in Afghanistan are the Afghan people. They are so different from the kind of people that we are. they're not unfriendly. They're often quite friendly. Even the people that may not like Americans will often be quite cooperative. You have naturally a bit of a language problem, but they'll do their best to communicate effectively with you. And as I say, you can go shopping, you can go into a bazaar and haggle. And you have to haggle. You never respond to the first price. That would be an insult. You have to show an interest and talk and ask about prices, things like this. But beyond that, the Afghan people are kind of, as I say, interesting to get to know. There's one thing, though, that unites every Afghan, and that is they are proud of the fact that they have never been conquered. Other countries have been attempting to conquer Afghanistan since the time of Alexander the Great. There were successive invasions throughout the Middle Ages, and we know that in the 19th century, England made a real attempt to take over Afghanistan. And quite a few English people were in the service over there. We know from the Sherlock Holmes stories, Dr. Watson served in Afghanistan as a doctor, a medical person. So England was there, but left under very difficult circumstances. They were, I think, happy to leave. Anyway, subsequent to that, then there was an Afghan government, but then the Russians came in, and they came in 1979. They were there for 10 years. They came in force. When you're there, you find a lot of buildings within Kabul have been built by the Russians. They're not good building builders, by the way. The buildings are mostly falling down and crumbling. But they were there, and then the Taliban took over in the 90s, and then finally we arrived in, as I say, 2001. So Afghanistan remains Afghanistan, a country ruled by the Afghan people, and they are proud of that. But that does not mean that they are not willing to cooperate with us, even though we are trying to take over Afghanistan in a sense, or at least support the legitimate Afghan government. They will be very cooperative. They'll work for you. They like money. They will be happy to take a salary and work on things, whatever you're doing, military stuff, okay, fine. But in the back of their mind always is the thought, no, we're not going to go all the way with Americans or with NATO or with any outside force. We remain Afghanistan. So that's the situation that the United States today finds itself in. And what you can notice, here we have a presidential election taking place, all these debates. Is anybody talking about Afghanistan? We're fighting a major war over there for 15 years. Are we going to stay there? Well, President Obama wanted to reduce the forces. He got down to about 7,000 troops, but then they raised the number again. We're not told exactly how many, but he was told, obviously, by military people, look, we can't pull out any further than we already have. So we are quite strongly committed there. If you were reading newspapers last week, you saw that 2 American soldiers at Camp Moorhead, these are the indication of various installations that are there. Kabul, we have quite a few military installations. When I was there were a number, but we've given most of them back to the Afghans. However, these two soldiers were part of a group also with a number of military contractors that were at Camp Moorhead, which is just outside Kabul. And an Afghan who was in a soldier's uniform, I assume he was a soldier, we're not told exactly what happened, started firing, and he wounded 3 other Americans and killed 2. This is what we call a green on blue attack. And boy, this really shook us up. What a green on blue is we train an Afghan soldier or policeman. And the training goes on for quite a while, depending on how quickly they learn. But it could be, say, 4 or 5 months. Finally, they get a graduation ceremony and they're presented with a weapon. They've already learned to shoot, but they're presented with a weapon that they're supposed to be able to take care of, clean it, and so on and so forth. But what they do is they immediately turn it on an American and start shooting. That's a green on blue attack. But it's impossible to tell which Afghan is going to do this. So the result is our morale has really taken a hit. We don't know. Everybody's a little bit nervous. Whenever one of these green on blue occurs, people get very shook up. And there have been well over 100, I think about 160. And quite a few people have been killed. One American general was killed. So it can happen to almost anybody. And as I say, the recent one is proof that it's still happening. It was going on when I was over there, and as I say, we were quite unhappy and unsure about the people that we were often working with. So these various installations, these are indications of various military installations we had right around Kabul. There's a military headquarters there that we've given back to the Afghans. When I was there, it was a NATO headquarters. And you have all these different military installations around here. I was in Camp Phoenix. That was where I spent most of my time. A great deal of the book takes place there. Also, Camp Eggers was there. I think they've both been given back to the Afghans. All right, there are also bases, as I say, an English base here. We have a base out here in Herat. This is Iran. And these are the northern countries. When I went over there on my first tour, I spent my first tour down in Khost, which is right next to Pakistan, but we flew into a country up here called Kyrgyzstan, and that was quite an adventure flying in there and spending about 4 days there. It was very windswept. It was winter. It was windswept and cold and very unhospitable. All right, just getting to Afghanistan is quite difficult. All right, there's one other thing that I would definitely like to talk about that comes up in the story of the book. And on Edge, all the things that happen in this book are real, except the story about the hero. And this is the second book in the series. I did another book called The Rendition, also about the hero, who is a sort of semi-retired intelligence officer, and he gets called back into these situations. The first book dealt with Kosovo. So in this case, he comes back to On Edge, and things are happening that just don't make a great deal of sense. And he gets tipped off, he gets told about the Kabul Bank. What is the Kabul Bank? Well, this is so interesting, and most of us, nobody has heard about it because it doesn't get written up in the newspapers. You don't hear anything about it on television news or anything like this. It was founded in 2003. And it was supposed to be used as a conduit for us to pay the salaries of Afghan soldiers, police, and also to help with the infrastructure, rebuilding the country. We like to rebuild countries when we're fighting in them. So that was what happened, and we founded the bank, and our government asked President Karzai, who had been elected president of Afghanistan, who would be a good person to run the bank. He gave the name of two of his cronies, neither of whom had any financial experience, and neither of whom, as it turned out, was honest. Well, we deposited $1 billion in the bank, and within a relatively short time, it was all gone. We couldn't believe what happened, but they did a good job of concealing the fact that they had given the money to all their friends, so-called interest-free loans, this kind of thing. They were just spending the money all over the place. A great deal of it was spent in Dubai, places like this. Only in about 2009 did our government start to wake up to the fact that the $1 billion was gone. The first thing we did was we got a firm in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, to audit the bank. They came back with a report, well, the bank's in okay shape. Huh? Well,
I was their cousins.
You got that right?
we got a second audit going. That was a little different. And we also did a third audit, which is still secret. We don't exactly know what the situation is. A few things have been leaked. And from what I've heard, we have recovered a third of the money that's missing. I don't believe that at all. The first audit, as I said, was done by a firm from Pakistan, and it could have been that they were totally fooled, because as it's turned out, the bankers kept two sets of books. They could have just showed them the other set of books. This swindle was just right from the beginning there in movement. There was never anything beyond those people just taking American money. Well, the net result is this is the biggest bank fraud in the history of the world. And we taxpayers have taken the hit. And you just have to wonder, what's with our people in Washington? Is this possible? Well, when I was over there, they finally sent a team of auditors and people like this, money people, they were FBI agents. They spent all their time in the American embassy in Kabul. They never talked to anybody. And so very little was learned by American newspapers. When I was researching this, I found that I could find out much more from German and English newspapers than I could from the American papers. So as you can see, most of us don't know anything about this enormous swindle. Well, it was really breaking when I was there in 2010, so I thought to myself, I have to write about this. I tried to find out as much about it as I could. Wasn't always easy, but that is the background of the story here. So if you're reading On Edge, you're going to learn a great deal about what's going on in Afghanistan, what has happened there, and as I say, this is mostly news that just doesn't appear anywhere. So that is one of the aspects of the story. One other thing I just do want to mention and that is when I was stationed in Khost, we would sometimes go down into Pakistan. I'd go with a bunch of on the military personnel carrier, and we didn't know how far. The base I was on was called Camp Salerno. It was only a couple of kilometers from this line, the Durand line, which was drawn by the English back in the 19th century, but doesn't have any real significance because the Afghans consider themselves all one country here. And so we'd go into Pakistan, we didn't always know we were there. And they would shoot rockets back at us, back at our base from time to time, and usually in the evening. But the important thing is, today, Pakistan is supporting the Taliban. So our battle with the Taliban really is with an ally. Pakistan is technically an ally of the United States. It's such a strange situation. And but they recruit in Pakistan. They find it very easy to find people to serve, young guys who are ready to become Taliban soldiers, drive the Americans and all their friends out of Afghanistan. If one dies, there are 3 or 4 there ready to take their place. And they're good fighters. They wear sandals and just very light uniforms. Our soldiers are carrying 80 pounds of gear plus a weapon. That's not the greatest kind of outfit for Afghanistan, where you just have mountains like this. If you want to travel 5 miles, you have to travel 20 miles up and down. It's just impossible to move through certain areas. It's unbelievable. So, as I say, that's a really tough situation for our people over there when we're involved in some kind of battle. That's usually the situation. The Taliban, mostly young guys who speak the language, know their way around. They can hide easily, so it's difficult. So that's pretty much the situation that exists in Afghanistan and has existed for roughly the last 15 years. And that's the background of the book.
So why don't you take the questions first?
Okay, if anybody has a question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You were saying before that the Afghan people,
Yeah.
England was in there, Russia was in it, and they were able to stop all these people from taking over, right? Now, why can't they control the Taliban, the Afghan people? If they're that strong, we're able to keep
what a
out
great
these
question.
superpowers. These are their own people, correct? So if they're terrorists in their own country, I don't understand why the Afghan people, they've defeated everybody else who came to their country, and these are the people from their country. It just seems...
The Taliban is a religious movement, very conservative, very strict. So there are many Afghans who they're going to go along with this. They believe in the Quran. And these are the people in the modern world who are carrying on a certain tradition. So it's not that they necessarily would support them, but they're not too mad at them,
But they
as
look
long
the
as
other
they
way.
don't get bothered by the Taliban.
Right.
Now, something else about the Pashtun people, which make up most of Afghanistan, they live according to a code called Pashtun Wali, and it goes back 1,000 years, and it stresses loyalty, it stresses hospitality and revenge, and things like this. It's a very primitive kind of code. Now, some of the Afghans will, not be too enthusiastic about the Taliban. You're absolutely correct. Others will be supportive of the Taliban. So if you go out to a small town or a small city, the Taliban have taken over. They've gotten the mayor under their control, that sort of thing. So if you're an Afghan, you're going to go along with this. But in other areas, they've made themselves enemies of the local people, and they're not popular. So that's a good question. Why don't we, why can't we get some support there? Well, the Afghans, as I say, they've got their own way of thinking, and they're not necessarily going to always think in the same way. So that's part of the answer there. Well, another thing too is if you're a young Afghan, you're looking to get a job. There's no real businesses over there. There's no way you can go to get a job. Let's say you want to get married, you have children, you really want to support yourself and your family. There's only one place where you're going to get a salary. That's if you join the Afghan National Army or you become an Afghan policeman. There you'll get a salary, a regular salary, and you're being paid by Uncle Sam. So a lot of your young Afghans will become soldiers, but when they're confronted with a battle with the Taliban, those guys are motivated. They're idealistic. They're fighting to get rid of Americans. And so our people, the Afghan soldiers that we support, they're not that involved. They're going to maybe duck out a bit.
So why do we bother? I
Good
mean, I
question.
don't get it. I really just don't.
Why do they join?
Why do we bother?
Why do we bother?
Why
Well,
don't we just leave them there? I mean, really, it's almost similar to Vietnam, except it's worse because the Vietnamese didn't attack us. But it's the same thing over and over. We just keep doing that and bringing our soldiers there and spending all our money. It's crazy. I don't know.
And why doesn't this come up in the debates?
Because
Well,
nobody wants it.
It's a good thing Trump didn't know about that bank.
Yeah.
Can you imagine him? If he found out about that bank and he brought that up, what is he talking about?
Yeah, then they would have said, "Oh, he's really crazy."
Yeah, right. More fact checkers.
Yeah. That's
But,
unbelievable.
I have a question. In all the years that you were in Afghanistan, did you ever make an Afghan friend? And I don't mean just like superficially while you were working there, but somebody who you looked at them and you said, like this person was born in Afghanistan, but he should have been an American because, he likes rock and roll, or were there any people like that in the whole?
No.
Nobody.
No.
You
You
think?
might
Let me say
might
they're
be
different.
working.
Yeah, he did say they were different.
Yeah, as I say, you might be working and get to know somebody every day.
There's never
There was-
a connection though.
Yeah, the language is also a bit of a problem, but no, I don't think you'd become that friendly. There was one fellow who worked as an interpreter, and we used to have coffee with him, I'm going to say about 2 or 3 times a week, and he seemed to be very pro-American. He spoke good English, and he was somebody who you could talk with about things that you both know about. But with an ordinary Afghan, no. But you might work with the person and get along well with them. As I say, there are meetings with shopkeepers and people like this if you're downtown. You might meet somebody who's quite nice, say a taxi driver who is helpful, something like this. People will answer questions for you. But
They
beyond
invite
that,
you home for dinner.
Nothing like that, yeah.
Did you meet any soldiers who happened to marry an Afghan?
there are some examples of that. Of course, I guess we do our best to discourage it. But I have heard of situations like that. I didn't know any personally.
Okay.
But
I have a
it does happen.
question.
Yeah.
All these names like Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, and
Yeah.
they all end STAN.
Yeah.
Is STAN mean anything like like Happy Land or
Yeah, I think it
like
does
Riverville Vale or anything
Yeah,
like that?
right.
Some
Like,
kind
what
of
does
land.
STAN? Yeah, right.
I think it does
Levittown.
mean the land of some kind.
Yeah, or like I'm going to shoot you if you cross the borderland or
No man's land.
no man's land.
Disneyland.
I have a
I don't
question.
think so.
Yeah.
Way back in the 80s when the Russians been established in Afghanistan were finally removed and kicked out by the Afghan soldiers with the large help of the United States.
Yeah.
My opinion then, and still is today, and I'm not being sarcastic or facetious, I think we worked with the wrong side. We should, instead of chasing the Russians out, we should have protected the Russians, let them stay there, and they'd have all the headaches that the United States has, the Russians in Afghanistan.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Well, Russians are not exactly our
Well,
friends,
yeah.
though. Let's call it Putin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right, we really have to like,
Well,
Oh, God.
yeah, well, the Iron Curtain came down in 1989. That was about when the Russians were leaving Afghanistan. I think we could have been friendlier with Russia. This is, again, my own political
Help
opinion.
Russia.
Yeah. Have been friendlier with Russia at that time, and maybe even, like you say, helped Russia in Afghanistan.
There'd be a lot more
Yeah.
American soldiers alive and a lot more money
Yeah,
in
it's
the country.
ridiculous.
Well, yeah, in these situations, I certainly think we can question what our government is doing, and there doesn't seem to be any long-range plan now. What are we going to do? Just stay there
Yeah,
indefinitely?
forever.
Yeah.
oh, we always wait for the Trump Afghanistan casino.
Right, yeah, right.
Resort
That's another thing,
casino.
because they're an Arabic country, they probably frown upon Americans having bars and so, like.
Oh, that's
probably-
another thing, yeah.
They probably drink on the base, not.
That's another thing, yeah. You can go into a restaurant,
Uh-huh,
and you know the restaurants while you're there.
yeah.
So you know that some will serve alcohol.
Mhm.
So
Under the
those are
table.
the places that Americans and Europeans like to go to. So you can get alcohol in some places, but like the Hotel Serena, which is a very nice hotel, the best hotel in Kabul, no alcohol.
No, really.
No. So-
May I expand a little bit about what you said, what is not allowed under the Taliban? Besides all the restrictions, there's no such thing as movie, television, radio, no music
Right,
of
no
any
music.
kind
Great
under the
vacation spot.
Taliban. None.
Well, that's why they've gotten, that's why they've gotten
wall,
some of
right?
the Afghans mad at them, because today a lot of the Afghans are going along with their music, and they're bopping along just like young people in America, listening to the same hip hop and all that stuff. So, yes, they have antagonized quite a few people, and that's also a factor. But the Taliban is so well organized and so ready to kill and do whatever they have. They're so violent that people are really afraid of them.
So you guys are the best audience in the world. Thank you so much
Hey,
for
thank you.
coming.
Thank you.
Okay, and may you please not get washed away in the rain.
Oh,